Hi guys, Claudia Boleyn here, and today we're talking about episode 8 of WandaVision. I don't even know what to say about something so perfect, so magical, so exactly what I wanted, and yet had never imagined they would even do. I feel like in this episode, major spoiler alert of course, I feel like we saw the Scarlet Witch finally step out of the comics and step into the MCU, and this whole time with Wanda, I've loved her ever since she was introduced because of who she was in the comics. And I've been watching them build her towards this, and I've spent time worrying, thinking, are they taking her away from her roots? I remember when they Americanized her, and I thought, oh no, what are they doing? And then they dyed her hair red, and I thought, Wanda's got curly brunette hair, what's going on? They took away her twins so early, they took away Pietro from Wanda, and obviously in the comics they are a pair, or at least they're so tied together, their souls are so tied together, their stories are tied together. I didn't know what they were doing, and somehow, and I don't think this was even their original aim, I'm sure when they first conceived Wanda in the MCU they had no idea she was building to this. Somehow, Kevin Feige, somehow he's done it. Somehow he has taken that MCU version of Wanda and he has somehow made the mistakes, if they were mistakes, I don't know if they were planned, he has made them all make sense. Everything makes sense, and everything has led us to this place where Wanda is finally the Scarlet Witch that I adore from the comics. I've said before about how in the comics they've used Wanda's powers, her reality altering powers and her trauma and her history as a plot point, and it's been quite ableist, and the writing hasn't always been the best for her in the past. And this show has completely righted that, because this is not just, oh, Wanda's powers have backfired, and oh, it's funny, it's a sitcom, what can we do with this, she's the villain. The heart of this show is Wanda's emotion, it's her trauma, and it's her grief. And this, I didn't know what to make of it when they said it could be a mental health analogy, they're going to get into her grief and her history. I didn't know how much they were going to do that. This whole episode is basically what I want to play on repeat to people who didn't believe me when I said to them, Wanda is the strongest Avenger, she's the strongest character, she's been through the most trauma, she is the most loving. Something that really, really bugged me is in Age of Ultron, when Wanda and Pietro are referred to as terrorists, and that whole perspective shift. And the problem I had with the early phases of the MCU when they were first brought in was that it was still Tony Stark land, it was Tony's world, and obviously the MCU had been built around Tony Stark. So the idea of having the twins, their whole origin, being based on Tony Stark's weapons ruining their lives, their country is war-torn, their country is at war. And this is Tony's doing, this is the reality of his actions. Here they are, these two fully grown adults now, with powers, and this is Tony's sins coming back to bite him. And I feel like in doing that, the MCU flirted with those ideas. They were all in place. They kind of flirted with the ideas of showing that, but they never could let go of the sort of the glamorization. I don't want to say glamorization, but the hero of Tony Stark, Robert Downey Jr., their great star, and I feel like they struggled with that a lot. And I'm not saying Tony was always a terrible person, because I think his arc is that he starts as that person who makes the weapons, and then he ends his arc as someone who gives his life. So you can see that arc and growth for Tony, although I still think they could have done that a lot better in some ways. But I think with Tony still being alive in the MCU, it was almost too painful to look at. It was difficult for them to prioritise that experience of Wanda and Pietro. That had always been my problem, but now Tony is gone, we can actually look at the reality of that. I mean, this is not just a story, a villain origin for Wanda and Pietro. This episode, we saw that trauma happen on screen. Two young kids, a struggling family, a family who are poor and are having to sell things and seem to all live in one room. There's a bed in one room. It's a normal evening for them, and that involves their mother looking out of the window and seeing soldiers on the streets, seeing people firing. That's their life. And that was something that I wanted them to get into, because that's something special about Wanda and Pietro that they've done in the MCU. They've changed them a lot from the comics. Obviously, in the comics they were mutants, and they were from a Roma family, and they suffered a lot of oppression, and that was where their trauma came from. In the MCU they don't have mutants. They don't seem to have that Roma connection, although they might still go with that. But it is relevant to now. I mean, you can't just have your main character of the whole Marvel universe, like Tony, being that war criminal and like redeeming himself with sacrifice without looking at like the actual lives that were changed. Like, what's the reality of those weapons? What is the reality of military intervention in other countries that don't want that? Wanda and Pietro as characters, they represent that, and this is also why I think I would like to see Pietro come back. You know, I want to see him come back anyway, but I think there's a strong argument for bringing him back in that sense. But in some ways, I mean, it reminded me of lots of stuff that we see in the news and that's going on in the world. You know, there are lots of countries where there have been and still is military intervention, and it's all very well to look at it as like a political issue, like a, you know, a war issue, and talk all philosophically about it, but at the heart of it, you know, it's families and it's children that their lives are being completely hijacked and torn apart. It made me think of something I'd seen recently about the people in Palestine at the moment in the Gaza Strip. It made me think a lot about that. I think they really, in this episode, managed to put across to us that Wanda and Pietro never had any stability. So they had love from their parents. Their parents gave them everything they could, but they never had a real chance. You know, you see that they're trying to be happy, they're trying to live like a normal life, and they're idealising America. And I was always interested in why Wanda had gone for sitcoms, and I'd thought, I was hoping they'd do something like this, you know, show the influence of America on these other countries. And it's interesting that they're trying to learn English, you know, they're trying to learn English and get rid of their Sokovian, possibly because of the great poverty, and they think that's, you know, the only way. Were they planning to go to America? I mean, my family came from India, so they struggled financially in India. They were very poor but very brave and very bold, and, you know, came over here and learned English, and, you know, the culture was completely different. I do like that we have this backdrop of this theme of, you know, America and American weapons, and it does kind of apply to Britain too, but not in this particular story, but what that means for the people in these countries. And we saw that with Wanda and Pietro, and I cried so much I had to pause the episode just to, I mean, because I knew it happened. We knew that there was a bomb that went off and the parents died, and Pietro got Wanda and got her under the sofa, and they waited to be rescued for 2 days. But to actually see two children in that situation, and Wanda in her trauma as a child focusing on the TV show where everything is alright and everything's silly, it's just mischief, like it's not real death, like that's really traumatic, and that's pretty deep for the MCU. You know, I've not seen them really go there before. I wasn't expecting them to. And when they showed Wanda in the experiments with Hydra, it's interesting because Agatha said to her, like, your parents were murdered, you know, your home was destroyed, and your instinct was to join an anti-freedom terrorist organisation. And it's so much like Wanda and Pietro in the comics, because they are good people. In the comics, they join Magneto's Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, and their hearts and their politics are in the right place, because they want freedom for mutants and to make the world better and to change it. But because Magneto goes too far for them and can be very cruel and sadistic, they turn away from that. They also recognise that they're perhaps being used as pawns by Magneto. They don't want that. So I love that they gave Wanda a voice in this. They made her watch her being experimented on, and she said, like, they just wanted to change the world. Their focus since they were children was to try and stop Tony Stark, stop his weapons, stop this foreign intervention. I mean, I loved, something I did love in Age of Ultron is that they had Captain America himself say to Maria Hill that they were at war. Like, Maria Hill was dismissing them like they were just terrorists causing trouble. And he recognised, like Captain America recognised that, no, actually, for them, this is a war because this is their home and this is their lives. I mean, Wanda's life has been one long trauma in the MCU. And it's something that they never really got into before. I mean, if you think about it, they make it so clear in this episode. You actually get to walk through it with her going through the doors and Agatha watching like us. You see her, presumably her childhood was happy with her parents and her brother. She felt safe, but she wasn't safe. Like, you could tell the parents, you know, the mum looking out the window, they were scared for the kids. Then it's just her and Pietro for all those years in an orphanage, and they essentially lose their childhoods. Maybe Wanda retains a little bit of hers, but that's because she's a dreamer and she's able to escape into these worlds in her head, and she loves her sitcoms. Pietro loses his childhood because he has to become, like, the protector of Wanda and look out for her. That's what we see of him by the time we meet them in Age of Ultron. He's very much there to protect his sister because they're the only family they have. Then she loses the only family she has, and she is in this deep well of grief, and you feel like this trauma is threatening to rise up at all these different points in her life, but she holds them off. I love that depiction of Wanda. I love that for people that watch the show and have mental illness, and I feel that because if you're someone who watches the superhero genre, you like escapism, so you are watching it, especially at this time in history, you know, with the pandemic and everything, but aside from that, we are watching it as escapism ourselves. So if you are someone that's mentally ill watching that, you will automatically relate to Wanda, because you do, when you're struggling, a lot of us, you escape into the fantasy realm where things are different and everything's okay. And in the superhero genre, it's like Wanda and her sitcoms, because you know the good guys will win eventually. You know, terrible things will happen, but people will come back and the villain will get defeated. And it feels like Wanda's gonna sort of topple over the edge after she loses Pietro, who is her only family. In comes Vision, and I feel so blessed to have seen this scene, because for so long I've loved Wanda and Vision, so long. I loved them in the comics, I loved them from the very first time I saw them in Age of Ultron. It was so special to me, and I felt like I spent so much time, like, so many people were like, oh, they're boring, they're not a good couple. Like, I challenge anyone to, like, watch that scene. Like, that's their dynamic. When it's done right, that is Wanda and that is Vision. And, like, I challenge anyone not to see that as just total, like, love and reliability and safety and home, and, like, that's real soulmates. That is what has always been in those characters and why I love them so much. And I feel like a lot of people are gonna finally, like, click and be like, oh, that's it. Yes, friends, that's it. So when she's with Vision, you know, she is grieving Pietro, and I love that her story is about Pietro and it's about Vision, and it's all kind of tied into one. You know, it's not just, oh, this is my love story with Vision. It's when she was grieving Pietro, the most important person in her life and her only family, that's when Vision was there to kind of pick her up. And it's the loss of Pietro, or the love that Wanda has for Pietro, that Vision is able to observe as a synthezoid. And that's how he kind of learns about love and the strength of love and how it endures and loyalty. And in a way, that's kind of Pietro. Like, maybe I'm reaching, but it's the love that Wanda and Pietro have for each other. The fact that Wanda won't let go of Pietro, that nothing will make her feel better. The only thing that will make her feel better is seeing him again. That's Vision learning about love, you know? So Pietro is this heavy presence still. And I still think, again, that is why Pietro needs to come back, and I think it could happen. But he's been such a heavy presence in this story. And then Vision dies, and not only does he die, but it's worse. It's the indignity that he is given in death. He's not treated like a person. All Wanda wants for once is to do things properly, to get some closure, to bury him, and he's not even a person to these people. They are taking him apart. Like, it's easy to see Vision as just a robot or an android, but, like, that's Wanda's soulmate and the person that put her back together when she was grieving. The only person that was stopping her from already toppling over the edge. Because Wanda, like her son Billy in the future, is someone who always teeters on the edge. You know, she's very emotional, she has to distract herself, she's extremely loving. I think it just kind of drives home, like, the trauma and the sort of the disrespect and the dehumanization that Wanda has faced all her life. Because as a child, she wasn't a child. She knew that people in other countries didn't care about her. She was just collateral damage. She tried to fight for what was right, and Ultron turned out to be a maniac, and her and Pietro turned and did the right thing, and even then, she was regarded as a terrorist. She lost her brother. And Wanda kept trying. She kept trying to do the right thing and trying to make Pietro proud, and she's building this relationship with Vision, and things go wrong again, and we have the Sokovia Accords. Everything has just gone so wrong for Wanda at every turn in her life, and she keeps on trying to get it right. And I think the scene where we actually saw Wanda go to the plot in New Jersey that her and Vision had planned and dreamed that they were going to live in and have a normal life, and they were going to be each other's family, I just got so upset. Like, that is so... it's so them, it's so Wanda and Vision. They are these two lonely people that don't understand each other 100%, but they don't need to, because they give each other what the other one doesn't have. And I just love that feeling, that hope to them, that everything's gone so wrong, but they can be each other's family, because that's what they really want. That's what they both truly want, is family. When Wanda said that she was Vision's next of kin, it just broke my heart, because she is his family. Vision had nobody. He was born and he's not attached to a single person. But Wanda said, no, he's my family. And just in terms of Wanda's, like, emotional strength and her heroism, in Infinity War, when she has to kill Vision. Keep all this in mind, keep everything she's gone through in mind, and she really did what she did. She had to kill Vision. She didn't have to, she was powerful, she could have just put them in a little pocket universe right then. She wants to do what's right. Her and Pietro have that in common. Like, they both desperately want to make the world better, and that is what makes them such brilliant heroes, why they should both still be in the MCU, because they come from trauma, they come from this war-torn background, they come from so much tragedy, but they are people that, instead of like turning cynical, which it would be so easy to do, and so many people do, and also like there's not a shame in doing that, but so many people, they get their lives hijacked by trauma and by pain, and it ruins them, and it twists them, and it hurts them, and they never recover from it. But Wanda and Pietro were the sort of people that said, this was the world that I grew up in, and I don't want anyone else to grow up in that world. And I've said before in my more like society political videos that I believe there are two personalities in the world, just two, and I think that's how the world is split. I think there are people who go through pain and think because they went through pain, other people should have to go through it as well. And I think there are people that go through pain and decide nobody else is going to go through the pain that I went through. Wanda and Pietro are that second group of people. But yeah, Wanda literally creating Vision, like it seemed like she didn't know what she was doing. She just yelled in her grief, like when Pietro died, and Vision kind of like, he emerged out of her. I mean, like, you can't get any more soulmates than that. Like, they are the star-crossed lovers of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Soon they will be joined by Wanda's son and Wanda's son-in-law, Teddy. Billy and Teddy, they're also like one of those couples that come around like once in a blue moon and you just think, wow, how lovely. But Wanda actually was able to create Vision. She doesn't know how. It was like this desire she had. Like, she was so lonely. She's so afraid of being alone. And in terms of mental illness and mental health stuff, I talk about having borderline personality disorder, which is also known as emotional intensity disorder, so I relate to Wanda a lot with her emotional issues. But that fear of being alone, that fear of not having anybody, and the sense that if you are alone, when you are alone, you don't know who you are, you can't exist, you lose control, like you need somebody to stabilise you. That's what Pietro was, and that's what Vision was. Like, they were Wanda's stabilisers in the world, and without them, you know, she completely crumbles. I personally like relate to that a lot. When she loses Vision and she goes to New Jersey and she just like loses complete control, it is that terrifying fear of being alone, and I think that's Wanda's great fear. She doesn't know herself as a person that's stood on her own before, and she doesn't think she can. The absolute terror of looking at yourself and your own sadness is something that also, like, I guess some of you guys will relate to, because you cross over from people who watch this channel for mental health stuff and politics stuff and for fandom stuff. But that terror of looking at your trauma and looking at your past and processing it, and it's easier to look away and to go into escapism and to write and to watch TV, and that's what kind of a lot of us do. So yeah, I think Wanda is just an amazing depiction of mental health. She's not just like a metaphor, she is a depiction of grief and mental health. But it works so brilliantly in that superhero genre where you can kind of stretch it and make it fantastical. Okay, so Wanda finally got her title of the Scarlet Witch, and that's so exciting. So it doesn't look like they're going for Wanda as a mutant. Again, this could change when they bring the mutants into the MCU. They have the opportunity of making Wanda both a witch and a mutant, but at the moment it looks like they're going for the whole witch thing, which suits me. If you know my music and my sort of aesthetic, I love all that witchy stuff. So I love that stuff with Agatha at the start, at the Salem witch trials. I'll talk about Agatha in a bit. But it seems that Wanda's powers are like, she is the Scarlet Witch, or she was given her powers by the Scarlet Witch. And in the scene, which I'll put on the screen, you can kind of see, like, out of the Tesseract, you can see, like, the Scarlet Witch of the comics. And she comes down like a goddess, and it looks like Wanda herself. So last episode we had the antidepressants called Nexus, and the idea of Wanda being a Nexus being, I spoke about her being like this point on the map of the universe, of this particular universe, where all the magic kind of converges. So I kind of feel like maybe we're going to get like a sort of timeless time travel thing where Wanda is that being and she is going to give herself her powers, maybe. I mean, it looks like her in the scene. So in the comics, recently in the new Scarlet Witch run, I say new, like it's quite recent, they had Wanda as a witch, and it focused on her and Agatha, and Wanda solving kind of it's kind of like solving crimes, but like magical crimes. And then at the end she walks the witch's road with Agatha, and she has to deal with her life, she has to deal with her trauma, and while she's on that road she has to meet her biological mother. So she finds out that her actual biological mother, which, you know, I put in quotation marks because this changes in the comics a lot, they could change it again, but her name was Natalia Maximoff, and she was the Scarlet Witch, and it's thought that she passed her powers down to her daughter, so it was hereditary. So Wanda became the Scarlet Witch when her mother died, so it's something that passes down. Which is interesting because if we think about Billy and his powers and him getting his powers from Wanda, I mean, that could work. I don't think personally they're going to go with that. I think that the way they showed Wanda and Pietro with their parents, I just don't think they're going to add another mother now, because I think it will be too complicated, especially if they want to bring the mutants in and they have to also go with the whole, by the way, you're actually the children of Magneto and his wife. So I think it's going to be either, you know, Wanda, who is timeless, who has always been the Scarlet Witch because she's a Nexus being, and she exists outside of time, or it's going to be a former Scarlet Witch, a woman who held the title, so maybe like somebody is selected, kind of like the Sorcerer Supreme with Doctor Strange, and it's somebody that passes it on, like it's a title. I don't think it's going to be Wanda's like biological mother in this version. I think that would make things too complicated. But I can show you in this comic, this is the third of the series, so this is the final hex, and in this comic we have Wanda and Agnes walking the Witch's Road, and Wanda has to face her past and all her relationships, and there's this amazing scene which I will put here where you can see all of Wanda's like relationships. You can see Quicksilver and you can see Billy, you can see Magneto, like you can see loads of them, and she's having to come to terms with them, and they kind of like appear to her as shades. They're not really them, she has to get past them, and it's kind of about her feeling strong on her own and taking away those roles. Like she loves those people in her life, but she has to be able to stand on her own. That's kind of the story. But here she is with her mother and with Agnes. So Wanda's at the front, her mother is the pink one, Agnes is the sort of bluey purple one. It's interesting as well that in these comics it's Agatha that walks the Witch's Road with Wanda, and she kind of does in this version too, in like a darker way. I mean, it's Agatha who is there while Wanda is forced to relive her past. So that is kind of an idea they've taken from those comics and kind of twisted a bit. Now, talking of Agatha, I don't believe Agatha is bad. Now, I think she's more of a sort of anti-hero character, because I was thinking about what we saw this episode. I only saw it this morning, but I think if you flipped this all around, I think Agatha is more of a morally dubious sort of detective character, because she is there to find out what's going on. So she's a witch from the Salem witch trials. It turns out that yes, like we thought and like in the comics, she was burned at the witch trials, but from what we saw, she didn't make a deal with Mephisto. She actually had the power within her because she'd been practicing the dark arts, presumably to defeat the other witches in her coven who were trying to kill her. I feel like they didn't need to make her so sympathetic if she was just going to be a villain. I mean, it was pretty horrible to watch, and her own mother tried to kill her. So I definitely think they were trying to present her more as kind of morally grey. So if you understand it from her perspective, this is like, this whole thing in New Jersey is like this huge spike in magic, like she's never seen before. She's been practicing magic since long, long ago, thousands of years ago, and she's trying to figure out like, who is this Wanda and like, what is she doing? Also, she didn't hurt Wanda, like she hasn't really hurt Wanda. She hasn't hurt the children. She could have hurt the children, but she hasn't. They are more hostages to try and make Wanda do what she wants, because Wanda is so powerful. Also, when Agatha was saying about like, you are the Scarlet Witch when she named her, I wondered if like there was a sense of awe there. I might be wrong, but I think we may see, like in the comics, Agatha as more of a sort of morally dubious mentor figure, but she definitely wasn't there to kill Wanda. I mean, she was there as a detective to figure out what on earth was going on. So we found out more about Wanda's powers, and they've gone more for the comics powers with Wanda. So she has her hex powers, her probability hexes. So it's not that she can control what happens necessarily, but she can make sure the best outcome happens for her. So like when the bomb should have gone off and killed her and Pietro, but her power made it so that this particular bomb like just never went off, like something was wrong with it. So that's the power that we know she has, and that she seems to have had even before the whole Tesseract and the experiments going on, which again, if they bring the mutants into the MCU, I mean, that's a great way to explain that. They could say, oh yeah, she is a witch, but also that was part of her mutant power. Same with Pietro. I mean, I had this theory a long time ago that they were mutants and they had their powers when they were children, Pietro managed to get Wanda under the sofa and to safety so quickly, and they didn't go down the hole their parents did because of his super speed, and Wanda stopped the bomb going off because of her powers. So half of that has come true, so you know they could still do that with Pietro. But it's interesting, Agatha spoke about necromancy, so she is not able to bring people back from the dead. She doesn't have that power. She said that she couldn't bring Pietro back because his body was on another continent and it was full of holes. But that means that in the episode when Sparky died and Agatha asked Wanda, like, you can do that, when, you know, it was implied she could bring people back from the dead, which it looks like she actually has with Vision, because she doesn't have his body, she literally has just created him. It looks like that is something that Agatha and most witches can't do, but it is something that Wanda can do. And I just can't help, like, maybe it is just me being like a Pietro fanatic and desperately wanting him back, but I feel like there was so much to imply in this episode that, look, Wanda is not your ordinary witch. She can do these things. She can bring people back. Like, she has these huge powers. But I mean, I guess the question is, why hasn't she brought Pietro back already? I don't know. I don't know if I'm looking too far into it, and maybe I am. Maybe it's just wishful thinking, but I feel like Pietro is such a presence in this series, and he didn't have to be. They could have just played it as he was the brother that died and that was grief for her and let's move on. But we've had the fake Pietro, like, he's even called fake Pietro, like the imposter Pietro. That man is not your uncle, don't listen to him. He's called Fietro. We have her whole conversation with Vision back at the Avengers compound being about her grief for Pietro and how she won't be alright until she sees him again, and the endurance of love, and they're talking about necromancy, and we've got this huge amount of power that Wanda might finally be able to control, and we've got Billy, who also can walk through realities and is exceptionally powerful. Like, there's every option for him to come back. And just thinking in terms of a happy ending, like, they could go two ways. They could end this with Wanda being alone. They could take away the boys, they could take away Vision, Pietro could not come back, and the story could be that you have to deal with your grief and stand on your own 2 feet. They could do that, but they could, because it is escapism, and that's kind of what they're going for with Wanda herself, like, disappearing into the sitcom world because she's so depressed. They could have Wanda walk out of that world with everyone safe. She could have her boys, she could have Vision, who she's recreated, and she could have her brother. I mean, they are making it so clear to us that they are the people she cares about the most, and they are her family. The two great losses she had in Vision and Pietro, and they are the two great losses. They haven't played it just as, oh, Vision was the great loss and the soulmate. Like, no, they've really made a point to make Pietro important there, and obviously her children. People have said, oh no, but it would cheapen things if she could bring people back from the dead, but I just don't think in this genre that that's true. I think that it would if she was a character who could constantly just bring anyone back all the time, but I think that, you know, they could be like some sort of exception, like, oh, maybe her and Agatha's power together combined with Billy, who is untrained and born in like a strange pocket universe that Wanda's created. Maybe there's a cause and effect, like with witchcraft usually, so there's a price to be paid or something like that, you know. But I don't think in this genre, like, this is the superhero genre, these are the Marvel comics, characters are constantly coming back in different forms. Like, I don't think that would stretch our belief too far in this genre. I agree if it was like constantly bringing people back and Wanda could just snap her fingers and anyone was back, it wouldn't work. But I'm pretty sure they can work around this. As a writer, there's ways you could work around that and make it a one-time thing, and just to finally give Wanda her happy ending, because you get a sense that they've built her up as this character who's had trauma all her life. She's struggled her whole life. We care for her so much. They've made us care for her so much. We want her to have her happy ending. And what does her happy ending look like? It looks like having Vision and having Pietro and having her boys. Okay, lastly I'm going to talk about Vision. So Vision is the big surprise this episode, because it looks like we're going to be having Vision versus Vision in the final episode. Because there was that quote by Paul Bettany saying that he gets to work with someone he wanted to work with his whole life, and everyone was thinking, oh, like, who is this? Was he talking about himself there? Maybe. But what we have is the White Vision. So I think I've shown you West Coast Avengers before, but in that comic series, Vision is considered to be a danger and a weapon, so they take him apart. Wanda goes to go and get him. She finds him like all dismantled, like we see in this show. I've shown you that panel of the comic before, but when he is brought back to life, he is the White Vision because he doesn't emote, and she's still married to him, he still has his twins, but he can't emote, so that's incredibly tragic. And I just think, like, would they actually make us go through this whole trauma with Wanda, all this pain, and bring her out of it with a soulmate that doesn't know who she is and doesn't have emotions, like, would they do that to us? I don't think they would. In some genres, maybe they would. I don't think Marvel would. I really, really don't. I think they are taking us towards a happier ending for her, because I think it would just be too awful if not. Okay, I'm gonna go now. Thank you so much for watching. There's only gonna be one more of these because there's only one more episode of WandaVision, and I'm gonna be so sad when it's finished. But I have been so satisfied by this show and so impressed with it, and I'm just, above all, I'm just so grateful for it, because I never thought that I would see Wanda portrayed this well and in this way, and I just feel really, really blessed. Truly, like, I don't just mean that, like everyone says that, I feel really, really grateful. So, okay, tell me your thoughts in the comments, please, and I will see you next week. Okay, love you loads. Bye!